I escaped poverty in the USA by leaving the USA. And evidently, raising wildflowers did as well. And in this video, we are going to be learning her story and how she was able to escape a life of poverty. And in the USA, a life of poverty, just like most other places, is not a good life to live for greener pastures. But before we get into her story, let me tell you my story, and I'm going to tell you the Spark Notes version. I'm going to be very brief because this is already going to be a pretty long video. But basically, I started a YouTube channel, this YouTube channel right here, when I was 19 years old. By the time I was 21, I was making good money on YouTube to the tune of somewhere between $4,000 to $6,000 a month, which is good money, objectively speaking, for any 21-year-old on this planet. And I definitely made a few mistakes. Okay, I made a lot of mistakes with my money, as most 21-year-olds in that position would. And a year later, I was living in my car in LA. And that was my first time experiencing true poverty, because I grew up in a middle to upper middle class household. I didn't even know what poverty really was. But being in LA, sleeping in that car on those cold, cold nights with a hoodie, sweatpants, and shorts in a sleeping bag, and still being cold, having a cough, and not being able to get rid of it because you're sleeping in the cold every night. That taught me what poverty actually feels like. Eating canned beans and cold tortillas every day for dinner. It taught me what poverty actually feels like. And once I got a taste of it, I realized that was something that I never wanted to experience again. Now, ironically, a few years later, actually this year, 2025, a few months ago, I took my girlfriend on a trip across the US while living in a car. And this was a little different because we already kind of knew what our time frame would be, whereas when I was living in my car, it was for an indefinite period. I didn't know how long I would be doing it for. So it was a very different premise, different context, but ultimately it showed me that for starters, again, it's not a lifestyle that I personally want to live, but on top of that, even being impoverished in the US is still expensive. Now, granted, we did travel across the country, so fair enough, but off the top of my head, I recall when I calculated how much we spent for those 3.5 weeks, I think it was, 3.5 weeks of living in a car in the US, eating primarily canned food. I spent around $2,500 on that trip. $2,500 to live in a car. I am filming this video in Pattaya, Thailand, and right now we are spending a little over $1,000 a month. And we have an apartment. We don't need a car because we can just call Grab, which is basically like their version of Uber. And we get all the food we need. We are good on a little over $1,000 a month. And for the first time since getting with my girlfriend, and I'm gonna be a little vulnerable here with you, but for the first time, I'm actually able to financially provide. And although I know that she is perfectly capable of making money herself, and she's in the process of building her business to be able to add to the pot, it does make me feel good as a man. And if you're a man watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It makes me feel good as a man to be able to provide for her. Now, I've told my story. Let's go ahead and hear her story.
I read dozens and dozens of comments on my last video, and most of them were saying the same thing.
So just right off the bat, reading a few of these comments, if you're broke, how can you afford to travel around Southeast Asia? At least you can afford all that traveling. People don't realize that it's actually cheaper to move overseas than it is to live in the US, even in, again, a vehicle. Literally, it's a lot cheaper. The most expensive part about being overseas and traveling is just getting there. If you can pay the $1,000 for the plane ticket, which if you're in the US, you're probably paying some kind of rent or car payment. If you sell all of that stuff, all of your belongings, use that money for a plane ticket, you can come to a place like Thailand and rent an apartment for anywhere from $200 a month upward. I'm paying around $400 a month for this Airbnb. And because it's an Airbnb, I know that it's marked up a little bit, which means that the actual apartment itself, or I guess it's a condo, is probably closer to $250 a month. Don't know all the logistics of profit margins with Airbnbs, but I'm going to assume it's around $200 to $250 a month for the people I'm renting it from via Airbnb. So people don't realize it's cheaper to just do what we're doing than it is to struggle in the US.
That I was lying, that it was impossible for somebody who is low income to just pack up and leave America. But I'm here to tell you, not only is it very possible, and I know that because we did it, but that if you are living on a low income in the United States, if you are broke and you are struggling, maybe you should leave. For most of my adult life, my family has been living below the official federal poverty line.
So 2025 federal poverty level. I don't know why they specify Alaska and Hawaii separately from the US. Don't know why that's the case. But you can see for the 48 contiguous states, I'm from Texas, for a family of 2, my girlfriend and I, it'd be 21,000. I'm pretty sure I would be clearing that. So I'm not below the poverty line. But if you're in a position like this where you're making less than this right here, then to your point, it does behoove you to go somewhere where it's cheaper, because nowhere in the US is going to provide you the same balance of quality of life to cost of living that you'll find in pretty much most of the rest of the world.
In the United States, we were still able to leave. And now we live a whole lot better on a lot less money. You may think that I'm lying because nobody has ever shown you that it's possible before. But I'm not here to sell you a dream. I am here to share facts. If you think leaving the United States is impossible when you're broke, then this might be the video you want to stick around for. So let's just go ahead and bust the myth that poor people can't leave. Leaving the US feels impossible because most people have never seen it done. But I am here to share our story and show you that it can be done and lay out exactly how we made it happen.
So just for context, the reason why a lot of Americans probably didn't believe her is because, to her point, poor Americans are not traveling overseas, and they're not being exposed to people traveling overseas. In fact, most Americans, poor or not, don't even have their passports. I think it's something like 55% of Americans don't have a passport as of the 2020s. So people just don't know. I didn't know until I went to Spain and I realized, wow, my girlfriend, she is living in this flat, she has roommates, whatever, but I'm living in a car. And I'm sharing a bathroom with 100 men every morning at the gym, these dirty showers and whatnot. And she's spending less per month than I am for a much better lifestyle. That's interesting. I thought Spain was expensive. I thought Europe was expensive. I thought the rest of the world was expensive. Because in the US, only well-off people travel internationally. And so they're the only ones who know.
My family is not privileged. We are not sponsored. We just made a plan and sacrificed a lot in order to make this happen. Let's go through some of the comments that I received. Some of them were sincere and some of them were a little bit more entertaining, a little bit more combative. After we read through some of these comments, I will answer all of the questions and explain to you exactly how we did it. Wait, you're poor and you traveled? Not enough money to live in America, but enough money to travel to Southeast Asia. Does this make sense to anyone? Crazy. How did you come up with a way to do all this traveling? Traveling is very expensive, so that's probably the first idea we need to hear. I have a good feeling most are ready to go, we just don't know how to get out. Until we researched and honestly even did it, we didn't feel like it was possible either, so I totally get how overwhelming and impossible it seems, especially when Like, travel is presented to you as being really expensive, and if you do it a certain way, it is, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't add up. You were
That's one big difference I've noticed between Europe and the US is that for Europeans, traveling is the rule rather than the exception. And a big part of the reason why is because it's cheaper to travel. And that's another thing Americans do not understand is that, let's say, for example, if you want to come to Thailand, like myself, to get from Thailand to Vietnam is probably $50 for a plane ticket. In the US, $50 for a plane ticket might get you from Dallas to Houston, so within the same state, or Los Angeles to San Francisco. But you're not getting to a different country for $50 in the US. So I think Americans just don't understand that even in Europe, you can travel to different countries internationally, even by plane, for very, very cheap.
below poverty level in America, so you went traveling. As a family with kids, what? I was above poverty level in Russia, but I could never afford to travel with my wife and 3 little kids, even inside Russia, let alone abroad. So no, you need to revise something in your narrative. Don't worry, I'm going to answer all of that. There's something that you're not thinking about when you are traveling in the way that he's thinking about. So you're very poor, you barely make ends meet, and you've decided you've got to go somewhere else because even working isn't enough to survive. So you go traveling to all these other countries because you're so poor. I've worked my whole life, I have a home, I'm retired, but I still can't afford to go traveling around to other countries. So I don't think you're quite as poor as you're claiming to be. You dislike this country that much. Don't come back. We don't need you. God bless America.
People can be so ignorant in the comments sometimes. And the thing is, this person is going to act like they don't have enough to travel, but they literally have a home. They have a home. You can't tell me that you can't afford to travel to Thailand and you own a home. Does not compute with me at all.
So I get comments like this all the time about how, I get it. This person has worked really hard their entire life and they still don't have the money to go traveling, which might be something that they really want to do, even though they've worked really hard. And I have a lot of empathy for that. Then, you kind of turn it around to, I'm not telling the truth and just leave and don't come back because we don't need people like you anyway, right? So there's a little hostility there, but I get that people in the US are struggling financially. So again, this is something that you're not thinking through the whole situation. She has a house and responsibilities in the US.
What responsibilities though? Because she's retired. Look, I understand that she's being empathetic and she's trying to see it from their point of view, but some people honestly just deserve to be berated because I just don't understand all of that unnecessary hostility toward her. She's just trying to show you a different way and you're just being hostile for no reason at all, other than to project your own misery onto other people.
How did you afford to travel to Asia, thousands just to get there? We did not spend thousands to go to Asia, but I'll talk about that in a second. See, you're already ahead of some. There is no way my family, even with all of our funds together, could afford to travel around like that looking for a new country. In order to do that, you had money that most of us don't have. And then she said, again, in a different comment, sorry, cannot watch now. You're rich or you couldn't afford any of what you've done. That means you're lying someplace.
Oh my gosh. Honestly, sometimes it bothers me more seeing comments like this on other people's channels than on my own channel for whatever reason. This makes no sense. That logic doesn't compute. So because you can't find the funds to travel overseas means that she has to be lying. It makes no sense because here's the thing. All of these people who are making these comments, they are commenting from some sort of technological device, be it a phone, be it a computer, laptop. They're commenting somehow. And if they're commenting from a technological device, that means they had the money to get it. So again, people oftentimes think they're broke, but then you look at what they own and you realize that they could sell their stuff and quickly get to a country like Thailand.
This person has already decided that it's not possible, and instead of being curious and learning how we were able to make it happen for us and just making some assumptions, then she's just done and she's not even going to watch the rest of the video. She's not interested in learning how we did it. But if you're here, I hope that you are interested in learning how we did it. And then I've gotten a couple of comments that, are sincere. I completely agree and enjoyed your video. How do you afford to travel though? If I could afford to move, I would. I think a lot of people feel that way. I know we did before we left. So how do you fund your move to Asia? What do you do for an income? You couldn't have been doing that bad. Most people can't afford to travel to the next state. I see a lot of videos by expats that complain about American life and poverty, yet they're traveling all over the world. I need answers.
This right here is a really good point. Most people can't afford to travel to the next state. This is what I mean when I say that a lot of Americans are ignorant. And it's really just this big vicious cycle where they aren't aware of what's out there because they can't afford to actually go and see it. And so they operate purely based on assumptions, so they stay ignorant. So at the very least, it's good that these people are asking questions rather than drawing conclusions. But it is true that a lot of Americans cannot even afford to go to different parts of the US, let alone travel overseas. But again, they simply think that. They think, oh, I can't go to the next state. I can't go to New York or LA or whatever and see what's out there because I can't afford to. So I definitely can't afford to go overseas. But actually, to my point earlier, we lived in a van, we traveled the US, and that cost more money than coming to Asia, including the travel costs to actually get here. So just something to think about. Sometimes it's cheaper to go overseas than it is to travel within the US, interestingly enough.
And then this is the last comment that I will share. If you were broke with no job, how can you afford to travel all over? I smell YouTube video content creator BS. So I'm not here to convince the skeptics, but I am here to help people who want out, but they just don't know how to make it happen. They don't think that it's even an option. So let's say you're spending $2,000 or so a month in the United States just to meet all of your basic expenses, which is honestly very low. That is well below the federal poverty line in the US if you and your family are able to live on $2,000 a month or less. The reality is, globally, you're not poor, you're just trapped by US expenses. For that amount of money, you can live a very comfortable, stress-free life in a country that has a lower cost of living.
Exactly. People don't realize that American poverty is not the same as poverty in a place like Thailand. But when I say poverty, I'm speaking in relative terms. So you can be below the poverty line in the US, but then for the same amount of money, you can come to Thailand and literally live in a high-rise condo with a gym, a pool, etc. Or if you want to live a more modest lifestyle that's more similar to the lifestyle you're living in the US, you can probably live for $700 a month, give or take.
At that point, the real problem isn't your income, it is fear, lack of information, and just the mindset that you're unable to do anything else. The system that we're living in, the capitalist US system, benefits when you think you are too broke to escape. We are all about productivity in the US, and your worth and your value is based on how productive you can be. The amount of work that you are needing to do just to meet your most very basic expenses is continuing to increase. People have 2-3 jobs. Households just 40 years ago, they were single income households, and you could have a house, have a car, and take care of your whole family on just one income. And today, it's a two-income household, and more than likely more than just two jobs for two people, right? Like,
And you know what the real trap is? And I know I've talked at great length about this in other videos. The real trap is that student loan system. Because basically the way they have it set up is that in order to get a high paying job, for most people at least, that will allow you to have some money left over, you have to go to college. But in order to go to college, you have to pull out student loans. So that offsets the difference in income. And by the time you actually get to start reaping the rewards of the extra financial gain that you have from working at that higher end job, you're already into your 30s or 40s. You have children. And now you have to start saving for their college so that they can avoid the cycle that you spent most of your adult life in. So it's a really frustrating situation to witness from the outside looking in, let alone be a part of. And I'm glad I'm not a part of that.
you have to work really hard, and money just doesn't go as far as it used to. So a lot of people feel stuck and struggling, and you are told to work harder and harder and harder, hustle, 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 right? So we were never rich. We were just curious. We did a lot of research, and we made a plan to get out. We knew that we wanted to disconnect from the way society was working. I want you to know I have been on YouTube for many years, and I have shared our journey over the last many, many years. We have gone through a process of change, particularly over the last 3 or so years, of just trying to get out of the rat race, and we weren't ever 100% sure that we were going to move abroad and completely leave the US. That wasn't our ultimate goal, but that is just the way that it worked out. And because we were able to disconnect while in the United States, it caused us to be able to, it was just steps to being able to leave. During this entire process, we've never...
You know what? And that's something that really, really bothers me. If you're wondering why this video seems so much more emotionally charged than my other reaction videos, is because one of my pet peeves is when people see the outcome and they judge the outcome without having any regard for the process behind the outcome. Some people might look at a YouTube channel like mine, for example, and attribute all of the success to luck without seeing all of the sacrifices that someone like myself would have made to have gotten to this point. So that's why I just get pissed off when I see people, especially, she seems like a really nice person too. I don't know how you can direct so much hostility at someone like this, because she just seems like a really good-hearted person who's just trying to help people. That just bothers me. It really, really bothers me seeing that.
Never made a lot of money. We've always been labeled below the federal poverty line most years, and never much above it if we were. And most people, when they hear that we left the US, you heard the comments, like, instantly are like, this is impossible. There's no way that you could have done this. You must be lying. But if you think that, it instantly becomes impossible for you, because you've already shut that door. You're not curious anymore. You're not interested in learning. So to really...
Not to get all philosophical on you, but beliefs are very, very powerful. When you don't believe that something is possible, basically what you're doing is you're telling your subconscious mind to not even be aware of opportunities to fulfill whatever desire you may have. And so that's pretty much what she's saying, albeit in different terms, is that those people who were drawing conclusions rather than asking questions, they're never going to escape their situation, because their subconscious minds are programmed to seek out reasons why they can't escape their situation rather than how they can.
Sum it all up. You really don't need more money. What you need is different expenses. And this is how poor people can actually leave. This is what we actually did. We cut as many expenses as we could, and we sold everything. We sold our home. We lived off-grid in an RV for over a year. We were a one-car family. We cooked every meal at home. We had no internet for all of this time. We were going to the library and using free Wi-Fi. I mean, like every single little expense, we really scrutinized and we got rid of it if it wasn't absolutely necessary.
I went through a phase like that myself, albeit a much more privileged version of that. But basically, after a few months of living in a car, I realized, as embarrassing as it is to say, that I couldn't even afford to do that and pay my taxes. I had to pick. So I ended up driving my car back to Dallas, Texas to live with my parents again, which you can imagine how embarrassing that felt. Coming from this nice apartment to living in my car to moving back in with my parents. Very, very humbling experience. But in those months after that, when I moved back in with my parents, I was on a mission. I'm talking about I cut every possible expense. The only thing I had on a monthly basis was Spotify. That's the only expense that I was paying, and I think it was a worthwhile investment because music really helped me get through that season of my life. But everything from my gym membership, I was working out in the backyard, in the cold, in the heat, didn't matter. I was not spending any money on anything, not going out to eat, none of that. And it was worth it. It was worth it. But again, people, they don't want to look at the process. They just want to look at the outcome and judge that.
It wasn't easy. It was a lot of sacrifice, but those little things add up over time and made it possible. It was short-term sacrifice for long-term freedom. Most people can't leave because they are still paying to stay in America, and they're still thinking that they're going to have American expenses while they're gone. But remember, you can get rid of all of your American expenses and start completely over in a different country.
Exactly. That's the key right there. These people are envisioning paying for two lifestyles simultaneously. If I still had the apartment that I had in the US, but I'm here in Thailand in this Airbnb, which, by the way, wouldn't make any sense because I can only be in one place at a time. But if I was paying for both, I would not be able to afford to live here. I just wouldn't. But by getting rid of that apartment, by selling my car, by getting rid of everything that tied me to the US financially speaking, by paying off any debt I had, I freed up my income to move here. And that's the key, is you have to take your income and free up as much of it as possible by getting rid of all the unnecessary expenses. Don't try to pay for two lifestyles at the same time unless you are balling out of control. And if that's the case, the likelihood is that you will not be watching a video like this.
For example, health insurance and healthcare in the US is mostly unaffordable. Healthcare costs, prescription costs are all continuing to rise exponentially. Well, for us to travel, we are spending $57 a month for myself and my 2-year-old for our health insurance. And then when you do need to go to the doctor, even if you go and you pay out of pocket, the cost for healthcare is much, much lower here. Prescriptions are much, much lower. Think about the US healthcare system is a for-profit industry and they have monopolized the systems. You're being screwed over and they're charging you a ridiculous fee for all of these things. And you get good quality healthcare outside of the US for a fraction of the price.
That's another thing right there. A lot of Americans, even in watching a video like this, they're automatically going to assume that the lower cost of living comes with the lower quality of life. But to her point about healthcare, a lot of people don't know this. Thailand has a higher average life expectancy than the US. Just putting that out there.
Is really good quality, okay? You don't have to pay the high grocery prices that you're paying in the US anymore. Not only that, but the food is healthier. It's fresh. It's higher quality ingredients.
And this applies to Europe as well, by the way. Every European country I've been to, except for Switzerland, was noticeably cheaper than the US. Noticeably, especially when it came to groceries.
At a fraction of the price, which not only benefits your wallet, but is also going to benefit your health, which in the long run is going to potentially decrease your health cost. You get to swap your expensive apartment or mortgage for accommodations that are much less expensive and are generally fully furnished and include all of your utilities, internet, all of that. Okay, this place that we're staying now is like $750 a month. It's a one-bedroom apartment in the middle of downtown Bangkok, fully furnished.
Okay, so she's in Thailand. She's in Thailand as well. So that's pretty interesting. $750 a month for a one bedroom. We have a one bedroom as well, albeit it's probably a bit smaller than theirs because she said that she has a 2-year-old kid, so there's 3 of them. But I mean, you can kind of see the general gist of this apartment. It's small, but it's nice. It's functional. It has pretty much everything that my apartment in the US had, save for a dishwasher and an oven. Don't need an oven because we're actually cooking fresh meals now. And as far as the dishwasher goes, you have these. Don't need a dishwasher. It's actually a waste. I'm realizing now dishwashers are pretty much unnecessary. But even if you did want a dishwasher, you could probably pay more money and get an apartment with a dishwasher. The point is, especially when it comes to accommodation, it's a night and day difference. It is a completely different ball game living in a place like Thailand. And we have a gym, we have multiple pools at this apartment, and the great thing is that a lot of things are within walking distance, so we don't need a car either. And if she doesn't touch on that later, I'm gonna touch on that myself because that makes a big difference.
Free internet, water, utilities, a pool, a gym, like all of this amazing stuff is right here. And then you also can get rid of your car. All over the world has public transportation that the US just doesn't have. You're car dependent. In the US, you can get rid of your car payment, your car insurance, your gas, and just use public transportation and spend maybe $20 to $50 a month and not even have to own a vehicle.
So it's kind of interesting. She talked about it right after I mentioned it, but that might be the biggest difference right there. Outside of accommodation, of course, because paying $400 a month for an apartment like this is just completely impossible in the US. No matter who you are or where you are, it's not possible. Maybe with roommates, but even with roommates, in most cases, it's not possible. And if it is possible, you're gonna be in a place where you need a car. That's the real trick with the US. That is where they get you, is that if you're gonna be in a place with cheap rent, you have to have a car. If you're gonna be in a place where you don't need a car, you're not gonna have cheap rent. It's not possible to have both. And so what's killing a lot of Americans, I suspect, is car ownership. It's having a car, and to her point, car payments, car insurance, car maintenance. Actually, my first car, again, very privileged thing to say, but my parents just gave me a car for my first car, and it was already paid off. And even then, I remember, I think it was 2020 or 2021, one of those 2 years, I spent upwards of $2,000 on maintenance for that car, and it had fewer than 100,000 miles. Cars are expensive even if they're free. If somebody gave me a car right now, or if they offered me a car for free, I literally wouldn't take it because I realized that cars are intrinsically expensive.
So when you're thinking about moving, delete all of your American expenses and start over. What do these things cost in a different country? So next is, how do we get here? People think that it is incredibly expensive to even get to Southeast Asia or somewhere else in the world. Well, we flew to Thailand for $700, and that was for 3 people. $700 is, sell your car in the US and maybe you'll have $700, or if you have a car payment, that's a month of transportation expenses, car insurance, gas. $700 to get you out of the US and across the world. And the way that we did that is, when we knew we were leaving, we got a travel rewards credit card, and we put all of our necessary expenses on that credit card, and with sign up bonus points, and then after you spend an X amount of money in like 3 months when we signed up, we got extra bonus points. So we were able to apply all of those credit card reward points to a flight out of the country.
I don't know why I didn't think of that, because I have a travel credit card as well. That's really smart on their behalf. But that right there is one of the best uses of a credit card. I know that in a lot of European countries, especially the Netherlands, they just avoid credit cards altogether. But if you use a credit card responsibly, meaning you only use it to purchase things that you can afford to buy cash today, not tomorrow, but today. If you use it like that, then it's actually well worth it. I think a lot of Americans just don't have the discipline to do that, hence why the credit industry is so big out there and why so many Americans have so much consumer debt, is because they just lack the discipline. A lot of Americans have this strange mix of entitlement without really having the discipline to support it. And as you saw with some of those comments that she showed earlier in the video, doesn't make for a very good combination.
And got the price down to $700 for the three of us. As we're traveling around, we continue to put all of our hotel bookings, all of our flights, all of our, food, anything that we spend, we try and put that on our credit card, and we are continuing to build more points that can be applied for future flights.
And another side note, obviously when you use the credit card to buy everything that you would normally buy with the debit card, you make sure you pay the credit card off on time. So me, I use my credit card to buy most of those day-to-day expenses, but I pay it off, usually on auto pay. So I already have the system set up. I don't even have to think about it.
As we're traveling, it's really just a system. It's just playing the game in a smart way. We pay off our credit card every month. We are not putting extra expenses on there. These are things that we are going to be purchasing anyway. So play the game. Now this one is probably the most important thing that people need to consider, and that is figuring out some sort of remote income. I don't think people realize that we're still working as we are traveling. We didn't just save up a bunch of money and then are using that money to travel with. We are only spending the money that we make every month. There are so many different ways to make remote income, and it's going to be very specific to every person.
I think this is another thing where belief really comes into play, especially for the older generation. A lot of older people can't really fathom the notion of earning money from their computer, from wherever they are in the world. I think older people have a much more difficult time wrapping their minds around this because they didn't have those opportunities coming up. But we do. And I'm a great example of this, where I haven't worked at a traditional job since I was 19 years old. I'm 25, and pretty much every dollar I have made since then has come from YouTube in some way, shape, or form. So that is a big one. And I don't know if she's really going to dive into the logistics of that. It is a lot more difficult than even the most optimistic people anticipate. But it's possible. And especially with something like YouTube, the barrier of entry is incredibly low. All you need to do is learn how to do it. And once you learn how to do it, you just do it and you make money. And I know it sounds too good to be true. Sometimes I have to kind of shake myself to remind myself that, hey, you are literally making money to watch YouTube videos, which is crazy. It's crazy to think about that. Obviously, I'm adding my own insights as well, but conceptually, that's what I'm doing. And that's what allows me to pay that $1,000 a month for our living expenses in a place like Thailand. So that right there is the key. And again, people are going to hear that and they're going to think, oh, she's privileged because she's making money online or remotely. But again, there's a process behind that. And if you can learn that process by reverse engineering according to whatever remote income opportunity you're pursuing, and you actually follow the steps consistently, you will be in a position like her and like myself much sooner than you could ever possibly imagine.
I have this YouTube channel. This is something that I've had for a while and is something that can follow me wherever I go. My husband also started a YouTube channel that shares our traveling and our experiences. And then, of course, I'm sharing that on this channel as well. And just a little side note here, be really efficient in what you do, because our traveling is actually a tax write-off, right? So like if we do a video somewhere and show you around a certain area or an activity that we're doing, or, you know, a flight that we go on, and it becomes a YouTube video for our job, that's a potential tax write-off.
People charge thousands of dollars for the game that she's giving you for free 99 right now. But that is a big thing as well, is as a content creator, you do have access to a plethora of tax write-off opportunities.
Be efficient with your time, right? Make smart decisions. But I know not everyone wants to do YouTube, and it is a lot of work to get started doing YouTube and make a substantial amount of money. But you can do things like teach English online, you can do freelancing, you can sell stuff on Etsy, create your own Etsy shop, PDFs. You can actually get a job working with a company in customer support. And you don't have to get some like high paying job. Like if you think about it, a job where you make $10 an hour in the United States is like struggling. That's not enough money, right? But if you're making $10 an hour in a country that has a lower cost of living, like that's enough. You don't.
In Thailand, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of people are making around $10 a day. And actually, on that note, I just want to address any potential virtue signalers there might be in the comment section of either my video or her video regarding arbitraging that lower cost of living, because obviously Thai people are making less money on average, hence why the cost of living is so much lower. Now here's the thing, especially when you're talking about something like YouTube, of course we are making US dollars, or in my girlfriend's case, euros, from doing YouTube. But the thing is, this is an opportunity that they have access to as well. Thai people have access to YouTube as well. And I know this because if you walk down the street here, you will see people watching YouTube or TikTok. Now, is it everyone's obligation to start and run a YouTube channel? No, not saying that. But what I am saying is that it is possible for the people here to take advantage of the same exact opportunity because they have technology. And so there's nothing to stop them from starting a YouTube channel, creating content, or even doing something like video editing. And you see this a lot in places like Pakistan and India, for example, where a lot of the locals there are learning some of these skills. And you go on Fiverr and you'll see that you can get certain services for much less than you would expect, simply because they're willing to work for less because their cost of living is so much lower. So just wanted to address, again, the virtue signalers who say that it's amoral what we're doing. Everyone has access to this opportunity, including you. And how do I know this? Because you are watching this video on YouTube.
Don't have to be stressed out about it. That's living life. It's freedom. So we've now been living in Southeast Asia for the past 6 months, and our quality of life has improved so much. Our stress level is so much lower. We have really gone from surviving in the US to really thriving abroad.
And something else I just want to address. I mean, I think she said her kid is 2 years old. Just imagine how much more enriching of an experience this is for her child than living in poverty in the US. Just really think about that for a second. She gets the chance to live overseas, which is something that very few Americans get the opportunity to do. These are her child's formative years. Very, very important for developing her world views. I think it's a girl. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to offend her child or anything like that. But her child has the opportunity to experience different cultures. And that's going to make her child a much more well-rounded person with a much more broad perspective than most Americans, especially Americans who grow up in impoverished conditions.
People imagine living abroad is difficult or dangerous, but that is really the American media talking. It's not true. It's false, completely and totally false. I'll link a video up here that I did a few weeks ago when we were living in Da Nang, Vietnam for 6 weeks, and our monthly expenses there were $1,500. And that was in a beautiful 2-story home right by the beach. We had amazing food, just such a relaxing life. Now, we are going around and kind of traveling to different areas to experience different lifestyles here and kind of like find a place that we might want to stay more long term, and showing you guys also where all we're going and the experiences that we're having. Nothing's perfect. There's give and takes in some regard everywhere you go, but everywhere we've been has been better than our life back in the United States. It's just right now trying to find like what's the best place for us for now. The fact is, you don't need to make it in America to live well. You could just need to get out. Some people in the comments are still going to say that it's not possible, and that's fine. If you're determined to believe that it's impossible, then for you it is. But if even a small part of you is curious, start researching. Start watching other videos that showcase the cost of living in different areas. Get on Google Flights and look around and see what flights actually cost, because you can find some really great deals out there even without credit card reward points. Don't let fear or pride keep you stuck. I'm just saying that there's a way out, and whether you believe me or not, that is your prerogative. It does not change what is real. This video isn't for everyone, but it is for that one person who is struggling right now and wondering if they can leave. They really want to, but they just don't know how to do it. So if you're that person, I want you to know that you are not alone. You really can leave and get out. I know because I did, and life is a lot better. Not perfect, but you don't have to continue to struggle if you're...
Financial stress is unlike any stress that you can encounter in any other facet of life, maybe except for health stress. And I feel like a lot of times financial stress can even lead to health stress. So honestly, I fully support everything she said in this video. Fully, wholeheartedly. If you are an American, the American dream is no longer to succeed in America. The new American dream, especially nowadays, is to make US dollars and spend Thai baht or spend pesos, spend in a currency where the US dollar is favorable. And if you can do that, rest assured that you will be living a life well beyond the American dream that you've been marketed up to this point in your life.